It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app.
And it's a very good evening to you. 2100 hours on this Friday, the 28th of November 2025. Almost there for those of you who are just hanging on by a thread like some of us. So welcome to it. This is Africa World Hour. I am Tsepiso Makwetla. 60 minutes of the very latest news and current affairs developments. And of course, we delve into other areas of interest as well, whether it be music, literature, you name it, technology. We also talk all things economics as well. So do stay with us for the next hour as we bring you latest developments from the heart of Africa to all corners of the globe. Start with your news headlines.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Nigeria has declared a nationwide security emergency following a surge in mass kidnappings and deadly attacks. President Bola Tinubu has announced the measures after more than 24 school children abducted in Kebbi State were released this week. But the crisis is far from over, with reports of hundreds more taken from a Catholic school in Niger State. Our reporter Lebogang Mabange has the story.
The authorities said that the fire started in a lower apartment and spread to the higher levels of the buildings. It reached huge temperatures as it raged across the public housing estate. Officials said the cause of the fire was unclear. Police said they would begin entering the buildings to try to gather evidence. All of the fires have been put out 3 days after the blaze begun. The authorities have arrested members of a construction company and a consultancy on suspicion of manslaughter.
The fire service in Hong Kong says the fire alarms were not working properly in the tower blocks where the territory's worst blaze in decades happened. The number of people confirmed to have died in the fire has risen to 128. That report that you've just heard there was the BBC's Danny Vincent. Now, we go back to the story on Nigeria, where the police there say 11,000 officers were assigned to look after VIPs will be now transferred to other roles in order to strengthen frontline security. There is growing concern about the tide of violence in the country. The BBC's Chris Ewoko has the details.
This figure underscores how deeply entrenched VIP protection had become in Nigeria's policing culture. It is President Tinubu's boldest security reform yet. For decades, Nigeria's police force has been overstretched, with thousands of officers diverted to guard VIPs rather than protect ordinary citizens. Reports indicate that some VIPs even had multiple officers assigned to their families and properties, leaving rural communities virtually unpoliced.
South Africa's economic freedom fighters leader Julius Malema has accused Constitutional Court of being captured by President Cyril Ramaphosa. He was addressing hundreds of his supporters during their march on the Constitutional Court in Johannesburg. They want the Apex Court to immediately hand down its judgment on the Phala case, with a robbery at the president's farm becoming public knowledge. The case relates to the panel report of the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, which said President Cyril Ramaphosa has a case to answer. Judgment was reserved in November last year. Malema has rejected Justice Mandisa Maya's comments that there is a backlog of cases.
For more than a year, the highest court in the land cannot produce a simple judgment on whether Parliament acted rationally or irrationally when they voted against the panel recommendation. This Constitutional Court have embarrassed the whole country. We were told our Constitution will protect us. How can the judges not use the Constitution to protect the people of South Africa against a criminal that is occupying the office of the president? Chief Justice Mogoeng said there was an attempt to capture the judiciary.
And that was South Africa's economic freedom fighters. Now, Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies have begun searching the apartment of President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff, Andrei Yermak, who is one of Ukraine's main negotiators in the current peace talks, saying he will cooperate. The BBC's James Waterhouse has more details on this.
The timing for Ukraine internationally is disastrous. You know, Andrei Yermak is a central negotiator with the president. He has the trust of the president, his ear, he is his closest aide and close friend. And the Russian delegation are already talking up what is happening. Domestically, though, it looks different. You know, there's been a growing perception that Andrei Yermak is linked to several senior officials who are accused of siphoning $100 million off a public infrastructure project.
And finally, South Africa's acting Minister of Police, Firoz Kachalia, says the establishment of the Madlanga Commission and Parliament's ad hoc committee are important for the future of the criminal justice system in the country. The two bodies were set up by President Cyril Ramaphosa to probe explosive allegations of criminal infiltration and political interference in the criminal justice system. Kachalia was speaking at the release of quarterly crime statistics in Pretoria.
Organized crime is a direct threat to the safety of our people, to the growth of our economy, to the prosperity of our country, and is a threat to our national security. Criminal networks fuel violence, entrench corruption, and weaken our democratic institutions. These criminals, as we have seen recently, wear fancy suits and designer clothes, pretending that they are legitimate business people.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et le bon Dieu pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'a fait inspirer pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
The sound of Africa is evolving. Experience our new mobile app. Free to download. Free to connect.
Now, let's continue with Africa World Hour. As diplomatic tensions rise between Washington and Pretoria, now Berlin has entered the fray. It's saying that it will actively lobby US President Donald Trump to reverse his decision to bar South Africa from attending the 2026 G20 summit in Florida. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz told reporters in Berlin that the G20 and its sister forum, the G7, should not be made smaller without good reason. He said he will raise the issue in the upcoming calls and meetings with Trump, arguing that global challenges demand an inclusive forum. We now speak to political economist Professor Patrick Bond, who is currently in Germany, to talk about these developments and relations between the three countries. A very good evening to you, Prof. Thanks so much for speaking to us. So let's just first start with the strategic importance of Germany being the one to speak up so boldly about this.
Thank you very much, Tsepiso, and it's great to be in Berlin because I just happened to be at a conference here. It will be the likes of Friedrich Merz, who's coming from an ideology, let's call it neoconservative and neoliberal. He was formerly from BlackRock, a major financier, and he has taken over the Conservative Party and earlier this year won an election fairly decisively. But he is a far right. Let's think about it as sort of paleoconservative. That's what they call this MAGA, Make America Great. And here in Germany, it's called the Alternative for Germany. And it's this sort of neo-Nazi, a bit of a sort of fascistic element. And so they obviously are different than what Friedrich Merz and his predecessor, who's part of this government, whose name is Scholz, and the Social Democratic Party are all about. And that they're really all about assimilation. of countries like South Africa, and especially Tsepiso, they're worried about Russia if Donald Trump pulls away from Ukraine and basically helps Vladimir Putin consolidate this huge chunk of the east side of Ukraine. And the worry here in Berlin is whether maybe the next attack from Russia will be on a European state within NATO, within the European Union. And then because Donald Trump's quite unreliable, he's already said maybe NATO won't really enforce its policies of supporting each other. And at that point, I think Friedrich Merz says, well, maybe we need allies like Cyril Ramaphosa. So I see this in a bigger geopolitical and ideological context where Merz isn't very happy with the way Donald Trump's running the world.
And you say that it's because then what Donald Trump represents is a broader paleo-conservative ideology that's hostile to multilateral systems like the G20. So what is then likely to happen when the G7 meets? Is Germany going to try and ramp up more support for its stance when it says South Africa is a very important and strategic voice in geopolitics, given the challenges that the globe is facing?
Yes, now all of our South African audience knows that the G20 combines the G7, that is the West, the sort of imperial powers, the colonial powers, the US, Europe, Canada, Japan on the one hand, plus BRICS and a few others on the other. And now what if you're in the G7 and you're hosting it next year, as the French president Emmanuel Macron is, then you react to Donald Trump's brutality by inviting Cyril Ramaphosa and make the South Africans feel comfortable within the G7. Now, the G20 is only in December, middle of December. It's about 13 months away. So things will change, obviously. But Donald Trump, he may be under all kinds of pressure. He will have probably lost the Republican control of the Congress. He'll probably be on the defensive. His own right-wing MAGA at this point is already splitting over questions like the Jeffrey Epstein pedophilia sex scandal and Israel, where there are people saying, well, maybe Israel shouldn't have so much power over the U.S. government. People in Trump's own coalition, the far right. So it's a tenuous situation, and I kind of feel that what Trump's doing with his inappropriate discussions about South Africa, the so-called genocide of Afrikaner farmers. Don't forget that it's actually Trump who's hurting Afrikaner farmers the most with his tariffs, especially now, the tariffs that remain on grapes and vineyard products. But the main thing is that Trump is always speaking to a racist base, that is the white male left out, the sort of working class, the lower petty bourgeoisie, and for them somehow or other claiming that Afrikaner farmers are suffering, and that's why Trump can justify not going to the G20. Merz said it in an interesting way, the German chancellor. He said that Trump is basically throwing away his soft capital. He's tossing out the influence that he really needs, especially because Africa does have the most votes in the UN General Assembly, 54 roughly votes. And so it's a big gamble for Donald Trump just to be racist for the sake of supporting his own sort of ideological and maybe, sociocultural base. And that's where I think if we get into those serious geopolitical problems confronting the world, like the difficulty of getting peace in Gaza, in West Asia, or in Ukraine, or for that matter, Sudan and the Eastern DRC, Donald Trump just stands in the way. And I'd, of course, add that what we saw in South Africa on the weekend, we also saw in Brazil the prior 2 weeks, because Donald Trump and his people walked out of the climate summit. They've walked out of the World Health Organization. They've walked out of the United Nations Cultural Organization, UNESCO. They've walked out of, sort of the World Trade Organization and creating trade chaos. And in all these ways, Tsepiso, big questions arise. Should there be a G20 hosted by Donald Trump? Maybe it's a chance in the course of the next year to actually vote Trump off the island, get all the other members of that G20, and maybe meet in Mexico with the president there, Claudia Sheinbaum. She's probably the best of the whole lot of them to host instead of Trump in his Miami golf course.
And actually, that's a question I was about to ask you. Now, what does the G20 framework say? Can Donald Trump, as the US president, take such a unilateral stance? Are there rules that prohibit him from doing that? And as you mentioned, that there is then the option of having another country hosted, how would that be facilitated? How would it work within the G20 framework?
Well, we have two precedents, and one is that Barack Obama tossed out Russia from the G8, and it's now called the G7. And the reason was in 2014 that Vladimir Putin authorized the invasion of Crimea, that big southern chunk of the Ukraine. And so Obama said, get out of the G8 now, and then it'll be G7. He also tried to get them out of G20. He didn't have a sufficient consensus. So that's really what you need. You need enough votes to say, really, we don't want you in. And it really should be a broad consensus. The other precedent that I find compelling is that sometimes when the U.S. is extremely aggressive, and I've lived in that side and I know just how bad it can be ideologically, let's say you're Cuba or you're Palestine. 1988, going back nearly 40 years, you could find that Yasser Arafat, the Palestine Liberation Organization leader, was not allowed to come because he couldn't get a visa. And this is, of course, what Trump is threatening President Ramaphosa and his allies and his colleagues here with. No visa, you can't come. Even if the G20 doesn't expel you, we won't let you in. That's the sort of threat. Now, what happened in 1988 is revealing, because what happened in the United Nations General Assembly in December 1988, when President Ronald Reagan denied Arafat a visa to come visit and to be part of a discussion, well, the whole UN General Assembly moved to Geneva. They actually reconstituted in Switzerland, the second of the UN cities. Maybe there's an option to call for a move of the United Nations from New York, given, and we saw this again just a couple of months ago in September, where Mohammed Abbas, the Palestine Authority president, was not allowed to come because, again, denied a visa. And that's the very openly illegal and sort of very unprocedural way that the United States is operating. We just saw, for example, a shooting in Washington, D.C., an Afghan who had been part of the U.S. Sort of operations in Afghanistan, and he moved to the United States in 2021. So he killed a couple of the National Guard. And what Trump has replied with that last night, with saying, we will not let any third world people come here now. This is extreme, absolutely illegal and out of control. And that means, I think, people may want to say, well, actually, we can't really do business in Manhattan. Maybe, Geneva, yeah, but maybe we should even push for Nairobi as the next headquarters of the United Nations, at least for the next 3 years, until Donald Trump and his sort of team, hopefully, is voted out.
As they say, watch the space. Patrick, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Professor Bond is a political economist speaking to us from Germany, as he says, where the country has been the first of the major powers to stand up and admonish U.S. President Donald Trump for his unilateral move to turf South Africa from the G20 meeting in 2026 when it's hosting. So that brings the time to 18 minutes past 9. We'll continue with this subject.
Siyabangena manje. Vito iJabulani Nkolele iMagoda. Jabulani is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. Very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit, il faut de la patience, comme ça, les choses vont venir au bon moment et les bons dieux pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'avait inspiré pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
We continue looking at geopolitics, particularly the tensions between Pretoria and Washington. This time we speak to Dr. Tsepiso, a member of Parliament in Botswana and also a member of the Pan-African Parliament, who has voiced his serious concerns over what he describes as a deafening quietness of regional bodies, including the Southern African Development Community, SADC, and other African states. According to him, in a time when South Africa is being bullied by an external power, the silence of their neighbours speaks of volumes. He warns that such silence may indicate complacency or worse, a tacit acceptance, and cautions that the same pressure currently directed at South Africa could very soon be directed at other African countries. And Dr. Tsepiso joins us now. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
So what would that look like, that speaking out on behalf of South Africa by SADC and perhaps the AU, other countries? We've just seen Germany opine and speak directly to the issue and saying it'll actually engage President Donald Trump to reverse his decision. How then should other regional bodies be stepping up?
I think, first of all, the regional bodies should be standing in solidarity with South Africa. They should be confirming what they know about South Africa, that what South Africa is being accused of doing, which they say is genocide. It is us in Africa who know what is happening in Africa. Some of us in Botswana, we visit there. The Pan-African Parliament is headquarters in South Africa's Midrand. So we know what is happening in Africa. So we should have been the first to voice out that the first, it is not true. We should just say unequivocally that it is absolutely not true that South Africa has committed genocide. South Africa has not denied that they are experiencing high levels of crime like any other crime. But when it comes to genocide, first of all, the SADC, the AU should have first indicated that that is not true. And they should also have voiced just a concern about the deteriorating relationship between Washington and Pretoria, and also acknowledge the efforts that South Africa has done in terms of trying to normalize the relationship.
So what are the dangers of not acting out decisively? And I'm just speaking about, yes, they bear the moral responsibility to speak out against when one member is being unduly externally pressurized by a superpower, as it were, but just for cohesion in the region and also as part of Agenda 2063 and all these other objectives of standing as a strong continent. What are the dangers of these countries not speaking out?
The danger is that we will be setting a very bad precedence. And if we are not speaking out, like I said, we will be complicit in what is happening. And South Africa is the little light in this continent. We cannot deny that South Africa is an economic superpower. And anything that happens to South Africa would affect the sub-region, would affect the continent. When South Africa sneezes, Botswana will catch cold. The whole region will suffer. So South Africa is not like a small economy. So it will have devastating consequences if South Africa is going to be squeezed to its knees.
And just your thoughts on what this is, the silence, what it's indicative of in other countries? Is it a fear of muddying the waters with the US and then falling out of favor? And what about the regional bodies like SADC? Is it not what people have often accused it of, part of its diplomatic culture, to be reactive?
Yes, I think individuals, countries will be vulnerable. And that is why we appeal to regional bodies, because the regional bodies are in a better position because they are collective. So if SADC voices it as a collective against this brutality and attack on South Africa, as a collective, it is much safer than as individual countries. And so is the continent, the AU.
So just going forward then, how should Africa respond as a bloc to international tensions? Because we've seen it unfortunately divided when it comes to the United Nations General Assembly on tennis issues such as the tensions in the Middle East, what is happening in Gaza as a result of Israeli bombardment, and other issues before the ICJ. How should it? Yes, you can go ahead, sir.
Yes, I think it is unfortunate that, like you are saying, it appears that Africa is not united in its approach. I think countries, individual countries, maybe are trying to strike deals with the Americans. There have been threats of tariffs. And the way we are approaching even the tariff issue, we are approaching it as individuals. But like you say, we are stronger when we are united. Single-handedly, we are very weak. So I think if we can come to realize that we will be more powerful if we are united on these matters, we will make an impact. Otherwise, like we say, united, divided we fall, united we stand.
And the Pan-African Parliament, what role can it play in all of this?
I wish it we were convened. I wish we were there in Parliament, because obviously some of us were going to put up a motion just to condemn the acts and be in solidarity with South Africa. Unfortunately, maybe we are going to be meeting in February, but even then, I think it may not be too late for us as Pan-African. I'm definitely sure that if a motion was tabled at the Pan-African Parliament, we'll be in agreement.
Dr. Kisitegile Khobotswang, a member of Parliament in Botswana and also a member of the Pan-African Parliament, thank you very much for your time and sharing your views.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Leo tujadili kuhusu chipukizi wanaoimba nyimbo za wasanii wengine. Unadhani hili linatokana na nini, Omari?
Nadhani kweli kwamba tukizama muziki ya sasa, hasa wasanii ambao ni chipukizi, kwa kweli kwamba yani karibu kutoka muziki wao wenyewe, lakini wanakuwa wanataka kuhubiria muziki ya zamani za muziki ya wengine ambao ni taimbo.
Wengine wanadai kufanya hivyo ni kupromote vipaji vyao haraka ili waweze kujulikana. Je, yawezekana kukawa na ukweli wowote au ndio kukosa kabisa kipaji cha kuandika mistari?
Ndio, unaona kwamba msanii anapoazimia kwamba kuchukua wimbo mwingine wa msanii mwingine na kurudia yani mara mbili sivyo, haionyeshi kwamba yani ndio wanaanza kazi ya muziki aizalini, lakini ukiangalia kabisa asilimia kubwa utakuta kwamba wanakosa ile mawazo ya kutunga muziki.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Africa World Hour, unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
And it's a Black Friday in South Africa and the world really observing this phenomenon. And we see South Africans spending, and the surge is already visible not only in the numbers but the banking apps as well. By midday alone, more than 1.5 million transactions worth over $29 million had already been processed through the country's major payment systems. So that's about 500 million rands. And the largest recorded at over 500,000. So in a single purchase, queues stretched outside major retailers and online platforms recorded record traffic. Consumers are chasing everything from grocery deals to big ticket electronics and other items. So we speak now to independent economist Amanda Fitchin about the day and what's going to happen. Of course, it ends around about Tuesday, Black Friday, that is. Amanda, very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Evening. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me again.
So I was reading some of the figures saying that there has been at least a rather more muted response to the Black Friday sales, just in terms of volumes. But when we look at this single highest purchase that was made, I think that is a first, isn't it?
I'm quite sure that's a first, and I was reading to try and see what else was going on. There's another very large transaction for some medical equipment.
Yes.
Which is around about 400,000. So those are, I would guess, those are not spur of the moment purchases. There'll be more necessities than just spending money because it's Black Friday.
But then there is somebody who spent that 500,000 to 500,000 on several other purchases. So are people, in terms of consumer behavior, are people really saving up, waiting for Black Friday sales? Or do you think that it's just spur of the moment because they're enticed by the sales and the packages being offered?
I did a SNAP survey in my family this evening to see whether we're with the crowd or out of the crowd. And it seems as if, just from the few people that I asked, that it's not as popular as it was in the past, and that people are not rushing out to buy things just because they're cheaper. And so if my family's anything to go by, the Black Friday attraction is not all that it was cut out to be.
And just in the trend that we're seeing, are people now more onto online shopping, or are they still flocking to the stores for in-store buying?
I live in a small place that I couldn't get to a mall, but I asked in my SNAP survey about mall behavior. And apparently, for example, in Maritzburg, at the Midlands Mall in Maritzburg, there were long queues to get into the mall. So people will be taking advantage of good deals and going to a mall. But I don't know that that's specific to Black Friday. South Africans tend to be mall rats and hang out at the mall and go to the mall for a meal or some form of entertainment.
Okay, we seem to be having a connection problem. Let's just take a quick break, and then we will come back to Amanda Fitchin and speak about the Black Friday phenomenon, what she's noticing in South Africa today.
The Midnight Snack, 12 to 3 a.m.
Muranziwa wa mina. Muranziwa means my love in Xitsonga. So if you're listening to this, just know that you are my love. Yes. You and I are an item. We're dating. We are together. So I love you, baby. Why are you blushing? Why are you blushing? Like, haven't you heard somebody confessing their love to you? I mean, you gotta get used to it now.
Right, we're back on the line to Amanda Fitchin, just going through Black Friday as a phenomenon, if the trends are still the same. We were speaking before we got interrupted there, Amanda, just about whether people are physically going to the stores, or is it more online shopping that's swept up in the hype? But also it would be interesting to look at what people are shopping for. Is it essentials? Is it luxury? And are they using unsecured credit to do so?
I tried to have a look at that this evening, but none of those figures are out yet. I suppose from next week they'll tell us about the shopping habits. If I had to guess shopping habits right now, I'd say that there would have been a bigger propensity for people to be shopping online, because it's become almost the way that people shop. And South Africa also has a large competition with Amazon just entering the market and Walmart coming in as well in one shop so far. So I think
Amanda, I'm afraid that we are having a major problem. There's some background noise that's preventing us from hearing you, and unfortunately the volume is also just dipped. I do apologize to you and our viewers, our listeners. We would have loved to continue this conversation, because it is something, certainly if you bank with FNB, First National Bank in South Africa, RMB, you would have experienced technical problems. The bank itself said it's collapsed. None of the other major banks reported this, but they also reported seeing high volumes in purchases. Banks such as Discovery, others, APSA and Capitec as well, seeing a surge in shopping as a result of Black Friday. Would have been an interesting dive into. It brings the time to 24 minutes to 10. We continue with news and developments here on Africa World Hour.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa World Hour, unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Now, the European Parliament has taken a bold step in the growing global debate over children's digital safety. In a strongly supported resolution, MEPs are calling for a ban on social media use for children under 16 unless parents give consent from the age of 13. While the proposal is not yet legally binding, it does add significant pressure on the EU to introduce tougher regulations aimed at protecting minors from addictive online features, harmful algorithms, and growing mental health risks linked to excessive screen time. To get more analysis on this, we speak to our Idem Amenya, who is from Ghana, the Executive Director at Child Online Africa. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Yeah, good evening. My pleasure connecting with you all the way, and nice speaking with you.
Thank you. It's good to speak to you as well. So what has been your reaction to hearing what is happening in Europe through the European Parliament's call for a ban on social media for children under 16?
Right. Thank you. My views on that will interest you.
Okay.
Yes. And I would say thank you for the opportunity. In our work at Child Online Africa, where we try to encourage children to have positive attitude towards technology, for over 10 years now, we have seen a trend. And having observed that trend, we feel there is a need for stiffer regulations when it comes to young people's engagement in the space. So we find the issue with regards to the European an interesting one, and very acceptable by us if we can decide to go by it. Because clearly, it's important that young people build a healthy relationship with technology. Africa being a developing country a developing continent for that matter, we see the trend in Europe as a shining example to us. Why are we saying this? We complain about young people being overly exposed to content that hitherto they wouldn't have had access to if not for technology. We seem not to have had the structures in place to ensure that they migrate to the space in a responsible manner. We also seem to be overwhelmed with the fact that the stakeholders who are working with these young people, teachers, parents, caregivers, and the rest, don't have an idea of what to do. So if Europe, which is infrastructure base of technology, is coming up with such a law, it's just worth it for us to say that, okay, if you see your neighbor's beard on fire, you need to wet yours. So that's what I would say to that.
Okay, so what you mentioned when you began your answer, that you are seeing a trend. What trend are you seeing, and how is it manifesting?
Okay, we see a trend of young people's digital diet being corrupted with all sort of content, which they have not opted for, but they are content which have been developed by the platform owners for profit. Addictive behaviors, inappropriate content, abusive language. And when we take our culture into perspective, those are not things that we would like young people to have access to. So for us, the European law, per my understanding, is not really a ban, but it's about delay of social media. So social media delay for young people, which will be a good option for us if we want to go by it. And last week, during the G20, we were raising a call for e-safety commission for Africa. That's one of the reasons why we were calling for that, because when we study Australia and what is going on there, we saw that Australian system, as far as e-safety is concerned, is one of the best practices to adopt as a continent. That is not to say that they are perfect, but then it's a very strategic approach to work with stakeholders who are in the space to ensure that content for children are worth what they have to take.
Okay, so then how would you design a policy for Africa that will reduce the dependency on social media in terms of unhealthy patterns, but also make sure that you are still teaching them how to interact with technology for the sake of development?
Okay. I envisage a policy for Africa taking into consideration the best interest of children. And this best interest of children will be that the capacity of the gatekeepers of children who are parents are built. So we look at a policy which is human-centered, not industry-centered or industry-focused. So human-centered, user empowerment is embedded, accountability and transparency is there, and the policies are cultural-wise or are Africa-centered. So we have our approach to be that the technology should be an enabler to us, not master of us. So when we are looking at developing a policy or designing a solution, that is what it will look like. As we have it currently, you see that cybersecurity authorities are regulating e-safety or online safety content for countries. But I feel that is a low-hanging fruit, which is not being done the way it ought to be done. So an e-safety commission will be best placed to push that kind of narrative and ensure that the policies are going to the benefit of young people.
And just finally, because, families are not born the same, just in terms of resources, it can be a bit overwhelming for
I lost you at a point, please.
Oh, I was saying because not all families are born equal. It can be overwhelming for parents or caregivers who have not been exposed to this fast-changing digital environment. How would they then be best empowered to teach children healthy habits and also be aware what they're watching?
Yes, when it comes to that, I will say that we need to take a lot of things into consideration. One of the things has to do with language. If we're going to have caregivers and parents to be involved and to be responsible for young people's engagement online, it's important we take the language needs into consideration. So if we're going to develop an empowerment tool for such audience, probably we might want to look at the multiple language approach, not only English language, but a language that they find relatable. Mind you, now AI is there to help us do a number of things, but the same AI is also introducing things that we wouldn't want to see in our homes there. So one of the things would be language needs, and then also maturation of the children. The young people have different developmental stages and they mature differently. So we cannot have one size fits all content to say that that is what we are feeding our audience. So it's important that we bring all the stakeholders to the table, get their input into whatever solution we want to have, and make sure that we are doing it or we are designing it in such a way that it's meeting the needs of the people and then filling the gaps that we need to fill. We thought that COVID-19 was going to give us a good leverage to prepare us adequately for technology use. But unfortunately, I think we've missed that opportunity. And once we've missed that opportunity, what is left for us to do now is to now pick the policy which is at the Africa Union level. That's the Africa Child Online Safety and Empowerment Policy, and make sure that it's working well for the greater good of our audience.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and insights. Awo Aidam Amenya, who is the Executive Director of Child Online Africa. It's now 12 minutes to 10.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Leo tujadili kuhusu chipukizi wanaoimba nyimbo za wasanii wengine. Unadhani hili linatokana na nini, Omari?
Nadhani kweli kwamba tukizama muziki ya sasa, hasa wasanii ambao ni chipukizi, kwa kweli kwamba yani karibu kutoka muziki wao wenyewe, lakini wanakuwa wanapenda kuhubiria muziki ya zamani hizo muziki ya wengine ambao ni taimbo.
Wengine wanadai kufanya hivyo ni kupromote vipaji vyao haraka ili waweze kujulikana. Je, yawezekana kukawa na ukweli wowote au ndio kukosa kabisa kipaji cha kuandika mistari?
Ndio, unaona kwamba msanii anapoazimia kwamba kuchukua wimbo mwingine wa msanii mwingine na kurudia yani mara mbili sivyo, haionyeshi kwamba yani ndo wanaanza kazi ya muziki aidha, lakini ukiangalia kabisa asilimia kubwa utakuta kwamba wanakosa ile mawazo ya kutunga muziki.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Africa World Hour, unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
Now at 11 minutes to 10, so just before we get into all things wine and being seen, and it's actually called Wine of Color South Africa. That is just in a moment. Shela Ntukumana joins us in the studio to tell us what's on her lineup this evening today.
So today we get to know the South African actress, theatre performer and worship leader Londiwe Martins. That happens in the first hour. Then in the second hour we learn all things love through music with Kondwani Nyamasauka.
Looking forward to that. Thank you, Shayla. And while we listen to that music, a bit of wine wouldn't hurt anybody. And now we're shining a spotlight on one of South Africa's most exciting champions of creativity, culture, and economic transformation, Janine Peterson, a Cape Town entrepreneur, strategist, and the powerhouse behind Wine of Colour South Africa. She's rewriting the story of who gets to be seen, who gets celebrated, and who gets to thrive in wine, tourism, hospitality, and art sectors. Through WOXA, she's built a national platform that lifts more than 30 Black-owned emerging enterprises into the global arena, not just with mentorship and training, but by opening real market access, building export pathways, and connecting South African talent to the world through food, culture, and design, as well as storytelling. She joins us now, Janine Peterson. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Tsepiso. I'm just finding a quiet spot. I thought that the mug and bean might be the best spot, but the coffee machines are running. Sorry, I just landed at OR Tambo International. Yes.
So, and that's because your event is coming up this weekend, yes?
Yes, it's coming up this weekend. So it's the Wine of Colour Food and Wine Show. It's our 5th year in a row running the Wine of Colour Food and Wine Show. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
And tell us about that. Well, how about we start at the beginning? What got you here? What inspired you to start WOXA? And the personal experiences that shaped your vision of inclusive growth in these industries?
Yeah, just to give the audience a little bit of background, I'm Janine Peterson and I'm the founder of Wine of Colour South Africa. I also run my own wine business, which is called J9 Wine, which I started back in 2016. And I think just through my own adversities in my own business, I realized that in South Africa, there was not much support in the wine industry for Black women per se, in terms of just those guidance and just those early stage, foundation stage guidance that we require in our businesses. And I must say that I have paid my school fees in this industry. And I remember one evening after we had such an intense sit down in 2019 with government and industry, really looking at how does this industry actually get transformed. And it was not one of our best meetings. And I came out of there so despondent, and I woke up at 4 a.m. in the morning and the words came to me. It's just like, Janine, be the change you want to see in this world. You've put the proposals forth. You've given it to industry. You've given it to government. You lobbied with your team and your emerging wine businesses that also was lobbying behind you. But just the vision was not clear to those that really was sitting at the table. So that's when we started saying, why don't we create our own table? And how does that table look like? And then Wine of Colour SA was then born in 2019. We really just went out there and we really tried and tested, and we lobbied together as industry players. And we said, okay, how do we make it work? How do we bring all our resources together, the little that we have, and try and build within this organization? So since then, we've done so many things. I mean, we've taken businesses to World Travel Market Africa. We've done Pro Wine Asia. We've run a series of pop-up shops across South Africa. We've recently done events at the Victoria Falls Food and Wine Festival. We took a delegation of 45 from the wine, hospitality, as well as tourism and arts and culture space. And then just a month ago, we came back from our Soil to Soul Europe tour, B2B tour, where we actually partnered with the Department of International Relations, where we've taken businesses to Germany, in Berlin, as well as Lisbon, Portugal, and then we attended Milan Week, Italy. So the organization has been growing from strength to strength since its inceptions. I would not say that has not come without its blood, sweat, and tears. But yeah, it's just a little girl from Atlantis that decided one day that she's tired of a corporate job. It's no longer serving her. Mom of two, sold all my assets to start my business. My car had to go, my house had to go, and I invested it into my organization.
Wow, that's
And,
amazing. And
yeah.
that's quite brave. But I want to focus on, because I like the idea of you saying that, you wanted to make sure that it's no longer up to a big corporate or the established societies that decide who must be seen, who must be celebrated in this world of wine, tourism, and hospitality. So just give us a sense, because the wonderful places that you've mentioned that you've been through, I hope from what you're telling me, because you're supporting emerging enterprises, that these are people who either typically would not have been there or would have never even thought in their wildest dreams that they would be there.
That's correct. That's definitely correct. And it's businesses that really, I mean, in today's day and age, not a lot of emerging businesses, entrepreneurs, when they come into the spaces, they really don't know where to go. And especially in the wine and the hospitality space, arts and culture, there's been many programs, but when the artists come to us, they would always say that, we've tried so many programs, but it's really not serving us. And we say, listen, what is it where do you see yourself? Let's not do a copy and paste approach. Let's look at exactly what is the vision for your brand? What is the vision for your business? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? And let's build on that. What have you done thus far? What do you need assistance with? And let's look at which activities and where we can actually slot you in. One of our key things, especially on the wine side, is the driving the compliance element, because there's quite a bit of red tape in the wine space, just to kind of get our members to understand the importance of compliance and how compliance allow you to access opportunities within the space. Yes, there's opportunities, but how do they access that opportunities? And only through having your compliance in order, we can then go to these organizations, whether it's an international organization or whether it's a South African organization or a government organization based in South Africa, and say, listen, these are the businesses that are market ready. Please support them for this initiative. This is what they've done thus far. This is the foundation stages. This is what we have brought to the table. Please now meet us rand to rand on that.
So how do you choose which businesses or entities, qualify to be part of your pathway? Because I understand from the write-up that you have that it's also about threading the beauty, the wonder, uniqueness of South African stories to resonate with an international audience.
Yes. So I would say it's very much specially curated businesses, and it's businesses that, number one, understand the spirit of Ubuntu. I am because you are. That is the foundation of our organization. Each one raise one. So as the one rise, the other one gets pulled up. So there's definitely a key focus on understanding what it is to work within a team, what it is to share, what it is to collaborate, as per se, because we have tried in the past to work in our silos as entrepreneurs, but the silos have just not been working for us. So how do we come together and weave in all our stories and put a curated collection of what South Africa has to offer to the world, and how do we package that, and which countries do we sell that to, and not forgetting our neighbors, like we had the event with our Zimbabwean partners, and understanding also how do we weave Africa into the story. So when we go out to the world, that we not just represent depicting South Africa, but we're weaving African stories within this.
So just finally, tell us about what's happening this weekend. So can anybody come and participate, and how, Janine, I'm not sure if you've muted yourself mistakenly, but I was just saying, could you just tell us about what's going to happen this weekend? Where can people experience this, and how to gain access? What can they expect?
Yes, so it's our food and wine show. The this place where I'm sitting is getting just really noisy. So it's the Wine of Color SA Food and Wine Show, and it's happening on the 29th and the 30th of November at Ramkiki. We've got various partners that's working with us on this. Kauru, we've got Mocha Capital that's collaborating with us, and then we've got our wine businesses. We've got Lover Wines, we've got G&M Wines, we've got Bolvenhoek Wines, we've got Zulu Girl Wines, and then of course we've got Nyimbali Wines, and then we've got J9 Wines, and many other businesses to come and explore in the art, culture, as well as design space. And then we've got our artists, we've got Venda Boy performing, we've got Lisa D that will be performing, and then we'll also have a delegate of diplomats that will be attending the event as well. So we've invited the various embassies, and we've also invited most of our corporate stakeholders.
All right.
APSA is our main sponsor for the event. So to look forward to, we've got our market area, we've got our wine masterclasses for those that want to really experience wine and want to learn more about wine. We've got our wine and food pairings for those that really want to understand the intricacy of what to pair your different wines with, which foods work for it. And then
Right.
yeah, and then
Janine, we're going to have to end it here, because I know you also are trying to find the right spot. We've come at the end of the program, but I look forward to it. And people just have to go online and look for Wine of Color SA to find out exactly the where and how. Thank you so much for joining us and speaking to us, Janine Peterson. That's the end of Africa World Hour today, this week. Enjoy the rest of your viewing here on Channel Africa. African Diaries up next with Shailendra Kumana.
When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk.